the papers of the government to review why this bill is outrageous and why we must not allow this under any circumstances to pass. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill, Bill number 345, and I quote what the bill says. It says that the Province of Nova Scotia will not provide financial aid for any private business in the province that is unable to remain operational due to the recent economic downturn. Well, I think the finance minister deserves a lesson on economics. Well, according to the economic curve of our kind of economy, there will be periods of boom and bust, boom and bust. So it's not a perfect system, but it's the best we got. So when everything is booming, the government reaps the benefits from that. The government collects taxes from that. But when things start to bust, the government has a responsibility to save businesses, to save the people, to save the corporations who have given them taxes all these years. Well, Mr. Speaker, the fact that this province would take a stand to not provide any financial aid is going to render the NSBI unoperational, Nova Scotia Business Initiative. It's going to be unoperational. And what about standing commitments right now? I am sure, Nova Scotia, we have standing commitments to provide financial aids, not limited to bailout, grants, loans, financial aid, because you said financial aid in the papers, so I would expect it to be anything, including grants and loans and whatnot. So, Mr. Speaker, this is highly irresponsible. Let's look at the potential devastation from this bill, Mr. Speaker. Imagine a world, well, that's a little bit anarchist, but let's imagine a Nova Scotia whose half of people, whereby the half of the people in Nova Scotia are employed by small businesses. This economic downturn was not their fault. This economic, would the two honourable members please listen to me and not collaborate among yourselves? The small businesses, Mr. Speaker, the small businesses employ half of the people in this province. And it's not their fault that this downturn has come into being. It's the fault of some fat, business-minded fellow on Wall Street who has been meddling and muddling in the systems in the New York Stock Exchange. So they are relatively good companies. They do business well, and now they're suffering. And another thing that is suffering is public confidence. If you suddenly say that you are going to stop providing any sort of financial aid to Nova Scotian private businesses, people are going to get scared. People will be scared to invest. People will be scared to come and buy things because they would want to hoard their money. And eventually, these businesses will be forced to close. We know the banks are not going to give them any sort of financial aid. These businesses will eventually fold along with all the people who are employed in these businesses. It will soon become a statistic, Mr. Speaker, but think of it. More than half of the people in this province are employed by small business. If small business is allowed to deplete, small business is allowed to disappear completely, we will enter depression. If we enter a depression, this nosedive will go belly up, and the finance minister will have that on her conscience. This is a highly outrageous bill, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the Premier stood up and told us that the United States bailouts have failed. He said that the government does not want to support failed businesses. The government is for the people. The government has to take care of the people. The government has a duty towards the people. And if the government wants to destroy the economy that helps the people, If the government wants to lose the jobs that the people have, if the government is willing to do that, I'd say we lay off the Premier, Mr. Speaker. If anyone should be laid off, I think it would be the Finance Minister and the Premier. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, for those reasons, we have seen very clearly that this bill must not be allowed to pass. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland South.
Hello, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for calling me. I have a point of info for you. You said half of Nova Scotia's workers are in small business. Where do you get the information from?
The Honourable Member from Cape Breton South.
I obviously quoted this from Stephen McNeill, the leader of the Liberal Party of Nova Scotia, but I have come to understand from his website that he got that information from the Nova Scotia Business Initiative, NSBI.
Thank you. The Honourable Member from King South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a couple of points I'd like to bring up. The first being, I'm astounded that the opposition doesn't know how we're going to implement this bill. It seems rather obvious that by saying we are not going to give any bailouts to any recent downturn companies, it seems pretty obvious that we're just not going to give any bailouts out. I'm confused of how that was misread, or whether it was read at all. The second thing I would like to point out is that they said that the economy goes through booms and it goes through downturns. Yes, it does. So why are we worrying? It's going to come back up, like they said, so let's just leave it alone and let it come back up. The third is they were talking about either giving reductions in taxes or other solutions other than the bailouts. Exactly. Let's talk about that another time. This is not the bill at hand. The bill at hand is that we don't want to give bailouts to companies that have been affected by the recent downturn, recent being after September. Now, that brings me to the third point, that they said that we're not giving any bailouts at all. This is not true. We, under no circumstances, said that we would not give any bailouts out. We said that we would not give any bailouts out after those since September. Now, this does not mean that we're going to guarantee bailouts for every company. It will be an application process where you can apply for a bailout like any other program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Call upon the Honourable Member from Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, now, as you can see, the word bailout keeps coming up, but in this document, Bill 345, the word financial aid is written down. That means that any grant and that any money asked for these privately owned small businesses will now be rejected. And now you say that they can apply and that they can be given out, then why does the bill still state that there will be no financial aid? So you're basically contradicting what you've written down by turning around and saying that, yeah, you can still apply and you might get it, but our bill says we are not going to give it to you. And I'd also like to question, Mr. Speaker, that it says here that whereas the current economic climate presents fiscal challenges to the province of Nova Scotia, I would like to know which fiscal challenges you see coming towards Nova Scotia and what parts of the economy they will affect. Thank you.
The Speaker recognizes the Honourable Member from Eastern Shore.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With regard